Joining us now, our Monday NHL insider from the Bob McCown podcast, the former executive producer, Hockey Night in Canada, Mr. John Shannon. How you doing?
I'm great, boys. How was your weekend?
Yeah, very
pretty good.
well. I love this time of year with all the different sports that are going on. So it was marvelous. A couple of things wanted to get to with you. First and foremost, did you hear Shannon putting gasoline on the fire last week? Vancouver and BC would not accept a rebuild. He told Donnie and Dolly, and I joined his podcast with McCown on Friday. We kicked that around a little bit. Tell me why you don't think. Tell me why you don't think this market would accept a rebuild.
Well, maybe I misheard the question. I'm not backing down from it, but I think there's enough talent on this club, and I think when people think about rebuild, I don't want to lose Elias Pettersson. I think hockey fans want Pettersson. I think hockey fans want Quinn Hughes, Bo Horvat if he gets signed. Miller, Demko.
So you were thinking the full tear down rebuild.
But that's the question.
They wouldn't get by.
I mean, I don't want to go. I don't want to go be 32nd in a 32 team league again. And I don't think any hockey fan would.
And of course they were. After 7 games. We've sort of talked about it in stages here.
7 games, man. Yeah. Come on.
We've sort of talked about it. Of course, they got buried early last year, right? And then played 650 hockey and couldn't get back to the postseason. So you're going to have to deal with our PTSD a little bit here, John.
Well, rebuild is a subjective word.
Well, there's two
right?
phases to it. I mean, the one phase that we've talked about is, are you going to move out Horvat, the UFA, to be Besser? The guys who are close to the core, if not in the core, but not the big three, Pettersson, Hughes, Demko. So if you're drawing a distinction between
you don't think
those
Miller's
two,
part of that group now?
I think there are 3 untouchables, if you will: Pettersson, Hughes, Demko.
Yeah, the guys that you're definitely going to grow with, definitively growing with. Yeah, and hey, JT Miller's still tradable this year, right? So that's the thing.
And Rutherford's using the term transition. He said when you're trying to transition your team and build it, moving at your top players is not the way to go, in his opinion.
Which is, case in point, Colorado Avalanche that did just that. They identified the stars they're going to hold on to.
Yep.
Said O'Reilly, Duchesne, Barry, you're not part of that.
Stastny too.
Stastny as well, and moved on. And there was I don't know, what do we call that? What do we call that instance? Is that a rebuild or is that a retool?
I mean, Colorado went down to 48 points that one year, so it has to be. But
Nathan McKinnon was still on the team.
That's true.
So again, it's all in the eye of the beholder, I suppose. What you label these things.
Some of it's the terminology in the lexicon as well. Have they restored your faith, John, after 2 wins?
Well, I think that they've shown me a little bit of how they can play the game, even with the defenses still porous as it is. And with Hughes coming back tomorrow night, I think that that's a positive. I think there are some good moving parts. And by the way, Thatcher Demko was Thatcher Demko on the weekend too. I mean, that was nice to see. So from that perspective, and both goalies actually did their jobs really well. I'm a patient guy. People around me, I'm always the guy preaching patience, not just in hockey, but I think that this team can turn it around and will turn it around on a regular basis. Yes.
Are you surprised by what's happening in the rest of the Western Conference? I mean, you can spin it 2 ways at this point.
Well, just before we go there, the reports that Rutherford went in there and got hot and told them, look, we're not afraid to waive some players and we'll be making moves if this continues. Are we ready to credit Rutherford with shooting a firecracker up there? And apparently it wasn't received well, but apparently the proof is in the pudding. They played better since.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it all started with his appearance on Hockey Night in Canada, because there isn't ever a word that Jim Rutherford doesn't utter that isn't planned. He's one of the most planned people I've ever met in my life. Every word that comes out of his mouth has meaning and has been decided on prior to it just blurting out. So for him to do what he did with Scott Oak is one thing, and then for him to say to the players is another thing. That I mean, you have to hope that's what's supposed to happen. So yeah, and again, who cares?
Mhm.
At a certain point, we're living this a little bit in Toronto. At a certain point, you have to stop worrying about what the players think, because the players should just play.
And a little bit irregular for a GM to be addressing them, particularly that early in the year. But of course, they held a players-only meeting after 3 games,
Well,
which is a
there's
little
threats
irregular.
of the waiver
And
wire,
if
threats of putting players on waiver wires too. I mean,
and I'd be very interested to know who he was.
So the Canucks, after the weekend, are, depending on how you look at it, just 4 points back of the wild card with a game in hand in some cases, or they are 1 point up on last place in the entire league. So, I mean, this speaks to how early it is here, John. But
by the way, guys,
they got those couple of wins.
Guys, you're in broadcasting. You can make ratings look like anything you want to. Standings are the same way.
Yeah. Yeah. But hey, it's still 3 games below 500, and we know in today's National Hockey League, even 500 is not good enough, right? So still lots of work left to do here.
Sure there is. But there is enough talent. Once everybody gets back, there is enough talent to win games. And even in the 5 games they started on the road, there were signs of really good things. And actually, in some of the situations, like the game in Philadelphia, not playing well and still up 2-0. So this is a journey that's going to take time. It's not going to be one of those ones where, we're just going to start from scratch today. It's just not going to happen. And I understand the fans having this, because they've lived it not for the time that Jim Rutherford and Patrick Allvin have been in town. They've lived it for decades. And they've seen this happen before. And by the way, Rutherford and Allvin, this learning curve of working in a market as intense as Vancouver, I think it's a huge learning curve for them too. So this is one of those ones where you look at it and say, okay, guys, let's just take our time and let's look at and be pragmatic about what's going on. And can this team play better? And the answer is yes. And we saw glimpses of that in the victory in Seattle, and the glimmer, and then the victory against Pittsburgh at home.
And, the whole front office in its own right, I believe you told us at one point, don't be surprised that they've got to figure some things out here with a big group of people who have never worked together before. Okay, let's move on. You had Barry Trotz on your podcast today. How was old Barry doing? Is he still sticking by he's out for the year and is planning on returning to coach for next year?
Let me put it to you this way. He's not going to take a job this week. He's not going to lobby for any jobs. He's still working out some personal and family issues. He has purchased a second house in Nashville because his daughter lives there. So he and his wife are actually moving into the house as we speak, to have some roots in the United States, in addition to their place on Kalamalka Lake in Vernon. So from that perspective, I think he's just still taking his time, and trying to figure out where he fits in the National Hockey League. I would not rule out management. I honestly would not rule out management for Barry as opposed to coaching, but I don't think Barry understands which one he wants to do yet. And by the way, no one has called. No one has requested to talk to him because he's still under contract from the Islanders. And so Lou has to give permission. And as of about 9 a.m. Vancouver time today, no one had asked permission.
Mm-hmm. When you say management, John, is that the old Bill Parcells line? They expect me to do the cook and I should be able to shop for some of the groceries. Is that what Barry envisions, a management / coaching roles, or a say in the player personnel if he's going back to the bench?
Well, let's put it this way, Matt. He and David Poile went to Nashville together. He coached 17 years in Nashville, and now went Washington and the Islanders in quick form. What has David Poile done in changing his job in that same period of time? And the answer is he hasn't changed jobs. There is better job security, longer-term job security in being a manager in this league than there is being a coach. The question will be is whether Barry likes the intensity of being a manager, because it's totally different than being right in the fire behind the bench as a coach. And I think he's still working that stuff out.
Interesting.
Canucks get a couple of groups of players here in terms of trades. What do you think the chances are that Ethan Bear can realize some of the potential that he's got in him? Because everybody loves the skill set. There's been something that has prevented him from being a top 4 defenseman. What do you think needs to happen there?
He's got to get in shape. Hopefully that's not going to be an issue. It was an issue in Edmonton, I can tell you that. And he's got to stay focused because I think that early on, his best time in Edmonton, I can't speak for Carolina, his best time at Edmonton was his first year when he was completely focused and involved. And then, started to read his own press clippings and realized how important he was to the club, and it wasn't the same after that. If this time in Carolina and sitting out as much as he has and coming home to British Columbia, because another guy in Kelowna, right, in the off season, if he can be a difference maker, then there's certainly talent there. There's certainly talent there. And I think that's something that, in reading what Bruce said, he does do a good job of helping players get back on the saddle, get back off the horse, rather. And I think that's important for a guy like Bear.
Lastly, from me, John, Mullet Arena has made its debut here for the National Hockey League, and it comes part and parcel with finding out that the good politicians there in Tempe are going to put the new arena project, and Bill Daley has called Mullet Arena a temporary solution, not a permanent solution, but that the permanent solution is going to be put to a vote to the citizenry there. You tell me, how concerned is the National Hockey League with the tanking job that's going on here in Arizona, and then B, the future home of the Coyotes, and I suppose C, the reviews on Mullet Arena this year?
Well, I mean, if you talk to people at the league or people at the club, the reviews are spectacular. Now, I think I watched both games from Mullet this weekend. Sight lines are fine. The rink noise is fine. The dressing rooms, are a month away from being finished, which is why the visiting team is in the community rink on a sheet of ice with plywood and carpet as the dressing room. I would argue that, that if they had 4,600 people for the Ranger game last night, Matt, and so that means they had 4,600 paying customers this time. There's no comps. That might be 1,600 more than they had for some games last year in Glendale, because there were a lot of comps last year in Glendale. So overall, and I think the league's being smart by calling it a temporary solution, because I think it's, if the vote on the 29th of November goes positive, then they can then start to believe in things changing in Tempe for the hockey club. If it doesn't go on the 29th, then I think there's another Pandora's box that has been opened, and whether Alex Morello and his people say, by the way, we have another site to build an arena and we have to go find government money somewhere else, or Gary says, no, I'm done now. I don't know if we're there yet, but all indications to the people I talk to is there's a good chance that the vote on the 29th of November will pass. So then things are looking better, and the temporary is for 3 years.
Yeah, and that would be the lifeline if things do pass. But a situation worth watching. Boy, it just seems like that. John, 10 years ago, I was dispatched there on emergency basis from the Globe and Mail because of the latest political happening on the arena side of things. So
listen, there was a time when I knew more about Glendale City Council than I did the Toronto City Council.
Me too, John. Me too. I'd actually been to City Hall in Glendale. I've had a lot of Canadian sports reporters, and that's probably saying something. Marvelous stuff, my friend. Thank you for this. Happy Halloween, John. Have a good week.
How do you like my costume? Monday. Is it pretty good?
Yeah, not so bad. You look like a television executive.
Well, then it really is a costume.